I took the assignment without thinking twice. A week in the Appalachians shooting fall foliage for a travel magazine. They wanted authenticity, isolation, those golden October colors that make people dream about mountain getaways. I rented a small cabin near Seneca Rocks, packed my camera gear, and drove 6 hours from Richmond. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt access road, surrounded by dense forest. No neighbors, no cell service. Just me, the mountains, and endless opportunities for the perfect shot. It felt like exactly what I needed. I arrived at the cabin late afternoon on the first day. The place was more isolated than the photos suggested. The dirt road twisted through hemlock and oak for nearly 2 miles before opening up to a small clearing. The cabin itself was basic but clean. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a wooden table near a stone fireplace. Harold, the owner, met me there to hand over the keys. He was maybe 70, thin, with weathered hands and a flannel shirt that had seen better decades. He gave me a quick tour, showed me how the well pump worked, and spread out a laminated trail map on the table. "You planning to hike much?" he asked. "Some," I said, "mostly looking for good vantage points for photos." He tapped a section of the map with his finger. "Northern area, marked with a thick black X, stay away from Widow's Ridge. That whole section up there." "Why's that?" "Folks get turned around up there, lost hikers every few years." He folded the map and slid it toward me. "Stick to the marked trails, you'll be fine." I thanked him and he left without much ceremony. I spent the rest of the evening unpacking my gear. 3 camera bodies, 5 lenses, tripod, batteries, memory cards. Everything had its place. I made a quick dinner, planned my sunrise shoot for the next morning at Spruce Knob, and went to bed early. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no voices, just wind moving through the trees. I slept well. Day 2 started at 5 in the morning. I drove to Spruce Knob, the highest point in West Virginia, and set up for sunrise. The shoot went perfectly. Fog rolled through the valleys, golden light filtered through the trees, and I filled 2 memory cards before 8. By noon, I was back at the cabin reviewing footage and eating a late lunch. That afternoon, I decided to explore the trails near the cabin. I chose Hemlock Trail, an easy 2-mile loop that circled through the woods behind the property. The forest was beautiful but strangely quiet. It was early October, migration season. There should have been birds, warblers, thrushes, maybe some late-season sparrows, but I heard nothing. No squirrels rustling in the leaves. No insects, just wind. I told myself it was probably the weather. A front moving through, something like that. I shot some landscape compositions and headed back as the light started fading around 6. When I reached the cabin, I noticed something small. Muddy footprints on the front steps. Large prints, bigger than mine, with a different tread pattern. My hiking boots were brown Merrells with a distinctive waffle sole. These were smooth, almost flat. Work boots, maybe. I figured Harold had stopped by to check on something. I went inside, locked the door, and didn't think about it again. That night I stayed up late editing photos on my laptop. Around 9 I heard a sound. Tap, 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 soft, deliberate knocking on the back window, the bedroom window. I stood up, flipped on the outdoor light, and grabbed my flashlight. Went outside and swept the beam around the entire perimeter of the cabin. Nothing, just trees and darkness. I convinced myself it was a branch. 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time at the front window, same rhythm, tap, tap, tap. I went out again, heart beating a little faster now. That's when I saw it. A single red maple leaf placed perfectly in the center of the front windowsill. Not blown there, placed. The edges were clean, no tears, like someone had selected it carefully. The weird part was this. There were no maple trees near the cabin. The area was all hemlock and oak. I'd have noticed a red maple. I picked up the leaf. It was damp, freshly picked. I turned in a slow circle, shining my light into the woods. Nothing moved. I brought the leaf inside, locked every door and window, and closed all the curtains. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Day 3, Morning. I was packing my camera bag for Blackwater Falls when I noticed something wrong. My main memory card, the one with over 400 shots from the previous 2 days, had been removed from my camera. It was sitting on the table next to my bag. Neat. Centered. Deliberate. I was certain, absolutely certain, I'd left that card in the camera the night before. I checked the camera. Empty slot. I checked my laptop. The backup files were still there, but someone had touched my gear. Or I'd done it myself in some exhausted fugue state. That's what I tried to tell myself. I checked the doors, still locked. Windows latched. No signs of entry. I needed to call Harold, but there was no signal. I drove 15 minutes to the nearest gas station, tried his number 3 times. Voicemail each time. I left a message asking him to call back, bought extra food and water, and sat in my car debating whether to return. I had 4 days left on my contract. I needed the photos. I needed the paycheck. I drove back. By the time I returned, it was late afternoon. I shot some photos around the cabin instead of venturing out, ate dinner early, around 7, and decided to sleep with a kitchen knife on the nightstand and a flashlight within reach. At 11, I woke up to footsteps. Clear, unmistakable footsteps on the wooden front porch. Creak, 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 slow, moving from left to right, then stopping at the front door. I lay frozen, gripping the knife, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped. 5 minutes of silence. I finally crept to the window and looked through a gap in the curtain. Nothing. I turned on the porch light. No one. But on the top step there was something new. A hiking glove. Faded green, old, caked with dirt. The brand label read Alpine Quest. Men's size, large. It wasn't mine. Day 4. I didn't sleep after that. At 6 in the morning, I made a decision. I was leaving. But first, I needed to get enough shots to fulfill my contract. I drove 40 minutes to Dolly Sod's Wilderness, a public area where I knew there'd be other people. I spent the day shooting. Around noon, I ran into an older couple on the trail. We chatted about the weather, the leaves, normal things. It felt good to hear human voices. I almost told them what was happening, but it sounded insane even in my head. By 3 in the afternoon, I drove back to the cabin to pack. When I pulled up, the front door was open. Not wide open, just ajar, 6 inches. I know I'd locked it. I sat in my car, engine running, and yelled, "Hello, anyone there?" But nothing. I tried calling 911, but the signal wasn't strong enough. I used my zoom lens to look through the windows. The cabin appeared empty. I grabbed my tripod like a weapon and went inside. The place was vacant, but things had been moved. A chair pulled away from the table. The refrigerator door slightly open. A water bottle on the counter half empty. I hadn't left that there. In the bedroom, my sleeping bag had been unzipped and spread open. My clothes were untouched, nothing stolen. Someone had been inside, not to take anything, just to be there. I started throwing things into my bag. It was 5:30, light fading fast. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps outside, this time on the leaves. I looked out the window and saw him. A figure standing maybe 50 feet away, just inside the tree line. Tall, thin, wearing a dark jacket and a hat, completely still, watching the cabin. I screamed, "I'm calling the police. Leave me alone." The figure didn't move. I held up my phone, pretended to dial, spoke loudly into it like I was talking to a dispatcher. After 30 seconds, the figure stepped backward into the shadows and disappeared. I didn't finish packing. I grabbed my keys, wallet, phone, and one camera, ran to my car, locked the doors, and drove. The dirt road seemed longer than I remembered. It was nearly dark now, just past 6. My hands shook on the wheel. I was about a mile from the main road when I glanced in the rearview mirror. A flashlight beam, moving on the trail behind me. Someone was following, running. I hit the gas. The car bounced hard over ruts and rocks. The beam fell back, but I didn't slow down until I hit pavement. I turned left toward Petersburg, the nearest town, and didn't stop for 20 minutes. At 7, I walked into the police station. Officer Daniels, a man in his 40s with graying hair and a kind face, listened to everything. He wrote it all down, asked about Harold, took his number. He called, no answer. "We'll send someone out to the cabin first thing tomorrow," he said. "But I'd advise you not to go back tonight." "I'm not," I said. I booked a room at a motel in town. That night I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and started reviewing photos. That's when I found them. In shots from day 3 near the cabin, background barely visible, a figure standing far back in the trees. I hadn't noticed when I took the photo. I zoomed in. Too blurry to see a face, but clearly a person, standing behind a tree trunk, watching. I went through every image from days 2 and 3. Found 3 more with the same shadowy figure, always distant, always watching. I took screenshots and emailed them to Officer Daniels. The next morning, Daniels called me. They'd been to the cabin, no one there, but they found something in the woods about 200 feet behind the property, a makeshift camp. Old sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, water bottles. Someone had been living there, watching the cabin for days. They didn't find any ID, no way to trace who it was. Harold finally called back. He admitted there'd been issues before. Another guest last year reported feeling watched. He hadn't told me because he was afraid I'd cancel the booking. Daniels advised me not to go back for my things. He'd coordinate with Harold to retrieve them. I agreed. Cut my losses. Left behind a jacket, some battery chargers, a few small items. I drove back to Richmond that same day. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment, sent from the cabin address. Inside were the things I'd left behind. My jacket, the chargers, a lens cap. And something else, a Polaroid photo. It showed me asleep in the cabin bed, taken through the bedroom window. The angle was from outside. You could see the faint glow of a flashlight illuminating my face through the glass. It was from one of the first nights, maybe night 1 or 2. I called Petersburg police immediately. They opened another investigation but found nothing. No fingerprints on the photo or package. Harold claimed he didn't send it. The case went cold. I never went back to the Appalachian Mountains. I didn't tell the magazine the real reason I couldn't finish the assignment. Just said there was a personal emergency. They accepted the photos I'd already taken. But sometimes, late at night in my apartment, I still see shadows move past my window. I check. Nothing there. But the feeling of being watched never fully goes away. I learned something that week in October. There are places, lonely places, where you're never truly alone. And sometimes the thing watching you doesn't want to hurt you. It just wants you to know it's there. I took the call from Sarah around 5:30 that afternoon. She sounded rough, voice scratchy and weak. Food poisoning, she said, or maybe just exhaustion catching up with her. Either way, she needed someone to cover her evening patrol at Blackwater Hollow. I live about 15 minutes from the ranger station, so I told her I'd handle it. The shift was simple enough. Check the trail, make sure no one was camping illegally, lock the gate, and head home. October patrols are usually quiet. Most visitors clear out before dark. The cold moves in fast this time of year in the Appalachians, and once the sun drops, the temperature follows right behind it. I grabbed my flashlight, clipped the radio to my belt, and took the gate key off the hook. The logbook showed the last patrol was 4 days ago. Routine check. No activity. I signed my name, wrote down the time, and headed out. By the time I parked at the trailhead, the sky was already fading to that deep purple you only get in the mountains. I locked the truck, took a breath of cold air, and started walking. The trail was narrow, uneven in spots, with roots twisting across the path like old scars. It's the kind of place that feels forgotten once summer ends. 20 minutes in, I heard something. Not loud, just a faint crack like a branch snapping underfoot. I stopped and listened. Nothing, just the wind moving through the trees. I kept going, sweeping my flashlight back and forth across the trail. That's when I saw it. A glint of something metallic off to the left, just past the tree line. I stepped off the path and pushed through the brush. There was a small clearing, maybe 10 feet across. It looked like someone had cut away the undergrowth by hand. An old backpack leaned against a tree stump, zippers rusted halfway open. Next to it sat a faded blue sleeping bag, damp and crumpled, but what caught my attention was the circle. It was made of small bird bones arranged carefully on the dirt. Tiny skulls in the center, wing bones laid out in perfect rings around them. It wasn't random. Someone had spent time on this. I crouched down, shining my light over the arrangement. My skin prickled. No one does something like this by accident. I called out, "Park Service, you need to come out." The words hung in the air for a few seconds. Then I heard leaves rustling behind a tree. A woman stepped into the beam of my flashlight. She looked to be in her 40s, maybe older. Long hair hung loose around her face and her clothes were dirty like she'd been out here for days, but she didn't look scared or surprised. She just stood there, staring at me with this blank expression. "You shouldn't be here after dark," she said. Her voice was flat, almost tired. I told her this was a public park, but camping wasn't allowed without a permit. She shook her head slowly. "I'm not camping, I'm waiting." I asked her what she was waiting for. "For them to stop following," she said. I looked around the clearing. There was no one else. I asked if she had a permit. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Permits don't matter out here. Not anymore." The conversation was already feeling wrong. I noticed she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the bone circle, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I told her she needed to leave, that I could help her get down to town where she could find a place to stay. She shook her head hard. "Can't go down there, they're closer to town." I asked who she was talking about. She pointed back toward the trail. "The ones who walk wrong, you've seen them before." I told her I hadn't seen anyone, "Not with your eyes," she said, "but you felt them. When you're alone on the trail and something makes you turn around." I had felt that before, more than once. That sudden instinct to look over your shoulder even when you know no one's there. But I pushed the thought away. "That's just natural instinct," I said. She stepped closer to the bone circle. "I make these to keep them away. They don't like circles, don't like things that close." She was shaking slightly. "They're here now, 3 of them, behind you past the ridge." I turned around, just trees and shadows. My radio crackled once, a burst of static, then went silent. I pressed the button, tried to call dispatch. "Nothing." She nodded like she'd been expecting it. "They do that. Break the signals first." I decided right then that I needed to get her off this mountain. "We're leaving now. Come with me." She didn't move. "If I leave this circle, they'll see me clearly." I was starting to lose my patience, but something in her voice made me hesitate. Then I heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching through dry leaves, coming from the direction of the ridge. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing but trees. The footsteps stopped. Silence stretched out for a few seconds. Then they started again. This time from the right, closer than before. It wasn't just one set. It sounded like 2, maybe 3 people walking. "Who's out there?" I called. No answer. The woman whispered, "Don't call to them. They'll answer with your voice." A chill ran down my spine. The footsteps were circling now, moving around the clearing, but I couldn't see anyone. My flashlight flickered once, then dimmed. I smacked it against my palm and it came back to full brightness. When I aimed it toward the trees, I saw something standing behind a thick oak. It had the shape of a person, but the posture was all wrong. The head was tilted at an angle that didn't look natural. The woman's voice cut through the silence. "They're testing, seeing if you'll run." I gripped the flashlight tighter. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could hear it in my ears. "We need to move now." She looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. "You still think running helps?" The shape behind the tree started moving, not walking, gliding. There was no sound of footsteps. I felt my chest tight. Another noise came from the left. Something crawling through the underbrush, low to the ground. I spun around, shining the light in that direction. My radio suddenly blared to life. Not static this time. A voice. My voice. "Hello, anyone there?" But I hadn't said anything. The woman stood up. "They have your voice now. Go fast." I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran. Behind me I heard something break into a sprint. Fast, too fast. I didn't look back. Branches whipped my face, roots tried to trip me, and my flashlight beam bounced wildly. For a split second, I saw something running parallel to me through the trees. Tall, thin, moving on all fours but with joints that bent the wrong way. I pushed harder, my lungs burning in the cold air. I saw the parking lot lights ahead. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. Whatever was behind me was still there. I could hear breathing, heavy, wet, and wrong. I reached my truck and fumbled for the keys. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped them. I snatched them off the ground and jammed the key into the lock. I risked a glance back toward the trail. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I felt them. Multiple presences standing just beyond the reach of the parking lot lights, not coming closer, just waiting. I threw myself into the truck and locked every door. I started the engine, my hands still trembling on the wheel. The radio crackled one last time. The woman's voice came through. "You left the circle open." Then silence. I threw the truck into gear and drove out of there without looking in the rearview mirror. When I hit the main road, my phone lit up with signal bars. I had a dozen missed calls from dispatch. I called back and told them I'd lost signal on the trail. I didn't mention the woman. I didn't mention the bone circle. I didn't mention the things I'd heard. I just said the trail needed to be closed for safety reasons. The next morning, I filed a report with my supervisor. She sent a team out to Blackwater Hollow to investigate. They found the clearing I'd described. The backpack and sleeping bag were still there, but there was no bone circle, no sign of the woman. What they did find were footprints, dozens of them going in different directions. Some of the prints looked off, too long, toes spread unnaturally wide. They marked it down as a trespasser incident and recommended the trail stay closed. No further action was taken. 2 years have passed since that night. I still work at the park, but I avoid Blackwater Hollow whenever I can. Last October, I had to patrol a trail nearby. At the edge of the path, I found a fresh bone circle, small bird skulls arranged in a perfect ring. I didn't stop to examine it. I just kept walking. This October, I was driving home on the highway that runs past the park entrance. I saw a woman walking along the shoulder of the road. Long hair, dirty clothes, the same blank stare. She looked directly at my truck as I passed. No smile, no wave, just that look. I checked my rearview mirror. She was still standing there in the middle of the road, not moving. Then 3 shapes stepped out of the tree line behind her. Tall, thin, standing in a way that didn't look right. I pressed the gas pedal down and didn't look back again. When I got home that night, there was a small bone circle on my front step. I don't know if it's meant to protect me or warn me, but I haven't broken it, and I'm never going back to Blackwater Hollow. I took the night shift at the old cold storage facility because the pay was 30% higher than day shifts. Simple math. The job seemed straightforward enough. Watch over construction equipment stored in an abandoned industrial cold storage unit deep in the Appalachian foothills. Make sure nobody broke in to steal the expensive machinery. The company rented the place for winter storage, and I was there from 10 at night until 8 in the morning. The nearest town was 45 minutes away by truck, and cell service cut out about halfway up the mountain road. I had a radio to contact the main office, a small monitoring cabin with 6 security cameras, and a thermos of coffee that never stayed hot long enough. On Wednesday night, October 12th, I learned that some jobs pay more for reasons that have nothing to do with convenience. The monitoring cabin sat at the edge of the gravel lot, a cramped box with a space heater that rattled and 6 screens mounted on the wall. I settled into the worn office chair around 11, watching the feeds flicker between views of the fence line, the main storage building, and the back lot. The temperature outside had dropped to 40 degrees, and fog rolled in thick from the tree line. Camera 4, positioned at the rear corner of the storage building, started glitching. The image jumped and froze, something I had seen a few times that week. I figured it was the cold messing with the equipment. Then the screen showed something that made my coffee cup stop halfway to my mouth. A tall, dark shape stood pressed against the storage building wall. It did not move for 3 full seconds while I stared, then the feed cut to static. I switched cameras and came back. Nothing there. Just an empty corner and fog. I decided to do my patrol early. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed the big flashlight, and stepped outside. The cold hit like a slap, turning my breath into white clouds. I walked the perimeter, checking the back corner where I had seen the shape on camera. Nothing unusual. The fence was intact, the locks were solid, the gravel showed no fresh tracks. When I returned to the cabin, I looked down at the wooden floor. Wet footprints led from the door to the chair where I had been sitting. They were not mine. These prints were larger, wider, the tread pattern unfamiliar. I stood in the doorway, flashlight sweeping the small space. I was alone. I crouched and touched one of the prints with my finger, still damp, very recent. I sat back down in front of the screens, heart thumping harder than I wanted to admit. All 6 cameras displayed their normal views for the next 20 minutes. Then I heard it, a metallic clang from inside the storage building. The main doors were secured with a heavy steel latch, and I had the only key on my belt. The sound came again, sharper this time, like someone walking between the metal shelving units inside. I picked up the radio and pressed the button. "Batch, this is Unit 7 requesting backup check." Static crackled through the speaker, then a voice responded. "Unit 7, that was all it said. The voice sounded familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. It was my voice, but slower, pitched slightly lower. I keyed the mic again. "Who is this?" Silent, just the soft hiss of dead air. I tried once more, no response. I clipped the radio back to my belt and walked toward the storage building. The main door was still latched, the padlock hanging secure. But the door itself had opened about 2 inches. Cold air leaked out from the gap, carrying a smell of metal and something old and damp. I knew I had closed that door tight at 10. I pushed it wider and aimed my flashlight inside. The temperature dropped immediately, cold enough to sting my face. Rows of tall metal shelves lined both sides, stacked with drills, saws, equipment cases, and pallets of materials. I heard footsteps from somewhere past the last row. Slow, steady, deliberate. I called out. "Security, whoever's in here needs to come out now." The footsteps stopped. I moved deeper into the storage building, keeping the flashlight beam straight ahead. My breath made thick clouds in the frigid air. I walked slowly down the center aisle, checking each row. All the equipment sat exactly where it should be. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing. At the last row, I stopped. A dark puddle spread across the concrete floor, thick and sticky. It was not oil. I shined the light directly on it. The liquid had a strange, reflective quality, a deep red color that looked almost black in the shadows. Next to the puddle lay a single red rubber glove, the kind cold storage workers used to wear decades ago. I bent down for a closer look. The glove was wet, still soft and pliable, like someone had just taken it off. I remembered then. This facility had a history. 6 years ago, a worker had been trapped in one of the old freezer rooms and died. I straightened up fast, suddenly feeling like someone was standing directly behind me. I spun around. Nobody there. The overhead lights in the building flickered once, then went completely dark. Only my flashlight remained. The radio on my hip crackled to life. Static built to a roar, then that slow voice came through again. "Marcus, check camera 4. It was my voice. Every syllable exact. I did not answer. I ran for the door. When I got close to the exit, my flashlight beam caught something on the wall. Fresh chalk marks, white letters in neat handwriting. October 12th. I burst through the door, slammed it shut behind me, and stood in the gravel lot trying to catch my breath. I made it back to the cabin, locked the door, and dropped into the chair. My hands were shaking. All 6 camera screens showed normal views. Empty lot, quiet building, nothing moving. I needed to know what I had missed. I rewound the recording from camera 4, going back 20 minutes to when I had been inside the building. The playback showed me walking the aisles, flashlight beam sweeping left and right. But behind me, about 15 feet back, another figure moved through the darkness. Same black jacket. Same height, same walking pace. The figure carried no light, just followed me through the shadows. I felt ice in my stomach. I fast-forwarded to camera 2, the view of the storage entrance. The recording showed me entering the building. But there, standing just outside the door after I went in, was that same figure. It stood completely still, facing inward, as if watching me through the walls. The camera angle made it impossible to see the face. I looked up at the live feed from camera 6, the one aimed at the cabin door. Someone stood right outside. I turned my head toward the door. There was no window, I could not see out. The door handle began to turn, slow and deliberate. I stood up and backed against the rear wall. The door opened. A man stepped inside. He wore a black jacket identical to mine. Black knit cap identical to mine. The light from the monitors lit his face. It was my face. Every feature, every line exactly the same. But the eyes had no emotion behind them, just a flat, empty stare. He stood in the doorway without speaking, then tilted his head to one side, too far. The angle was wrong, like the joints in his neck had loosened. I could not move. My legs would not respond. The copy of me stepped further into the cabin. Each footstep sounded exactly like mine, the same weight, the same rhythm. The radio on the desk crackled, but there was no static this time, just the sound of steady breathing. Something snapped in my brain. Survival instinct kicked through the paralysis. I lunged sideways toward the back door of the cabin, shouldered it open, and ran into the night. Fog surrounded everything, cutting visibility down to a few feet. I sprinted toward the parking area where my truck waited. Behind me, I heard the cabin door close. Not slam, just a normal, casual sound like someone shutting a door after leaving work. No running footsteps chased me. No shouting. But I felt it. Someone keeping pace behind me, matching my speed, breathing in the same rhythm. I did not look back. When I reached the parking lot, I saw my truck. Then I saw the second truck parked right next to it. Identical make and model, same color, same license plate. I skidded to a stop between them, pulling the key fob from my pocket. I hit the unlock button. Both trucks flashed their lights and chirped. I stood between the two vehicles, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The radio on my hip gave one last burst of noise. Wrong choice, Marcus. I looked down at the radio display. It read October 13th, 2:00 a.m. I chose the truck on the left, yanked the door open, and threw myself into the driver's seat. The engine started. I jammed my foot on the gas and tore out of the lot, gravel spraying behind me. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figure standing between the two trucks. It raised one hand and waved. Slowly. Like saying goodbye to an old friend. The mountain road twisted down through the fog. I could only see a few yards ahead, the headlights barely cutting through the thick white wall. I knew this road, drove it every night for 2 weeks. But now it felt different, wrong somehow. After 20 minutes, I realized I kept passing the same landmarks, the same sharp curve, the same gnarled tree, the same rusted road sign. I had driven this section 3 times now. I pulled over and checked my phone. No signal. The GPS spun uselessly. I tried the CB radio mounted under the dash. Static. I started driving again, slower this time, watching carefully for anything familiar. 10 minutes later, I saw streetlights ahead, the main road. I hit the gas and made it to the intersection, turning right toward town. 30 minutes of driving brought me to a 24-hour gas station. I pulled in, shut off the engine, and went inside. The clerk, an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun, looked at me with concern. "You look like you've seen something," she said. I nodded, bought coffee with shaking hands, and asked for directions back to town. She told me which roads to take, then added, "That old cold storage up the mountain, it's got a history. Used to work there myself, long time ago. Lost a good man there in October 2018. Strange things happen up there every year around this time. You be careful." I thanked her and walked back to the truck. Before starting the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror out of habit. A red rubber glove lay on the back seat, wet and sticky. I did not go back to the cabin. I drove straight to the company office in town. The sun was coming up, pushing through the cloud cover, turning the sky gray and pink. I found the supervisor and told him I was quitting, effective immediately. He did not ask many questions. "You're the third guard this year," he said. "Nobody lasts past October." I picked up my final paycheck, walked out, and drove to my rental house. I packed everything I owned in 2 hours. Clothes, books, the cheap furniture I could fit in the truck bed. By noon, I was heading south on the highway. I stopped at a small diner about an hour out of town. I took a booth by the window, ordered eggs and toast, and watched the parking lot while I ate. A truck identical to mine sat across the street. Same model, same color. Different license plate, I told myself. But someone sat in the driver's seat, facing my direction. I put cash on the table, stood up, and left without finishing my food. I did not look at the truck as I walked to mine. I drove for 6 straight hours, stopping only for gas until I reached Asheville, big enough to disappear in. I found a job at a hardware store, day shift only. I made it clear in the interview I would never work nights. The manager did not care. A month went by. Sometimes, when I drove with the radio on, I heard my own voice coming through the static between stations. Just a word or two, never a full sentence. I learned to turn the radio off when it happened. October ended. Winter came. I told myself the whole thing was exhaustion, stress, maybe carbon monoxide in that cabin messing with my head. But I never went back to night security work. And every October, when the fog rolls in and the temperature drops, I make sure to be home before dark. Some jobs pay more for a reason. Now I know what that reason is.